Oh, welcome in the latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Braden. I go by SEC Mike on Twitter, and I'm joined as always by my cousin Shane, who goes by Big Orange Balls on Twitter. What are you up to, you big Tennessee homer?
Hey, buddy, what's going on?
Oh, man, glad to have you back on the show. We actually got some, potentially big-time news here. We're going to get to it in a second, but got to ask you, man, how was the trip?
Trip was good, man. Went down there to Orlando, the big old wallet trap. It's funny, the older I get, I'm turning into Papaw, man. You know what I'm saying? It's like everything's just... I never noticed the nickel and diamond in Orlando, but the older I get, I am. We went to this place and they said, "Do you want a valet park?" And I said, "Well, how much is it?" I never used to ask that, but now I am. I'm curious. He said $40. I said, $40 to put it where? And he said, right here in this parking lot. And I said, literally the parking lot that's 15 feet away. You're going to charge me $40? I said, I'll just park it myself. He goes, "Oh, you can do that." He goes, "But you can't use this parking lot." And I'm like, what kind of racket is this? And I was like, well, where's the parking lot I would use? And he says, "You don't want to go down there. It's about half a mile." So I was like, I didn't know if that was a fat joke or not, but I was like, you're probably right. I don't. So here's your $40. So we get down there. It was a good time. We spent some time over at Universal this time. So we actually didn't do Disney. Yeah. Went to Universal, had the youngin' with me, and went out to eat a few times. Really good food. That's one thing I like about Orlando. They got great food. Your Voodoo Donuts was down there. I didn't get to stop there, but I did take pictures of it just to kind of make you jealous that I could have some if I wanted it. But all in all, it was a great event. I was glad to get back. We drove, and we're going to get into it a little bit because I want to let South Carolina fans know right out of the gate, I'm not mad at them, okay? But their traffic is ridiculous right now, especially through Columbia. They got it down to like 2 lanes, and they're doing construction and stuff. It was a hot mess. And as a Tennessee fan, it's a little sore sitting in Columbia, period. But when you can't move, you can't go farther than 5 miles an hour, it's like, oh, look, first you hinder us from the college football playoffs. Now you're hindering me from getting home. So Columbia, it's going to take some time, but I'm a little upset with you guys.
So it sounds like you got your second loss from Columbia here in just a couple months, huh?
Yeah, that's right. I was just waiting to see Beamer over there just gloating, about the traffic I was in, but it was miserable. And then when you get out of it, Asheville's got traffic, and so it's just another Carolina you got to worry about. And then the gorge right through there, they're messing up. So a 10-hour trip turned into a 13-and-a-half-hour trip. Now, to be fair, some of that is the girls that I'm with. For some reason, they like to fill up with drinks and then wonder why they got to pee the next exit. But that's just part of being on the road. So the road trips aren't as fun as they used to be, Mike.
Well, let's start right there in South Carolina, Shane, because, they have opened spring practice in Columbia. Things are slow. Obviously, right out the gate, can't even have
their traffic.
Yep, can't even have full pads on. But little nugget here. We'll get more into South Carolina as they get more into camp. But I just thought this was pretty fascinating, Shane, that we got Shane Beamer, and this is in the very beginning of his press conference, talking about the coaching staff he's assembled there, how they're hot commodities. Everybody's trying to hire people off his staff, including a fellow SEC East program. We'll get to that in just a second. Let's kick it over to Coach Shane Beamer.
Well, excited about the coaching staff that we have intact. The new guys that we've added, the ones that have stayed. We've had coaches on this year's staff that have turned down opportunities in the NFL, turned down opportunities in the SEC, turned down opportunities in the ACC to go places and coach. Just had one this week that turned down a fellow SEC East school. So it's great to know that there's a lot of people that are interested in our coaches. I've said it before, we got a heck of a coaching staff here at Carolina, and when so many teams are trying to hire your coaches, it's a great statement about what we have here at Carolina and where we're going as well. Challenge for us.
All right, Shane. So, hey, Beamer, he never misses an opportunity to kind of dunk on an opponent, so to speak. And who he's referencing here, Shane, it's pretty interesting. Florida's Billy Napier, their wide receivers coach, Kerry Colbert, jumped to the NFL, so they're currently looking for a receiver. They're already in camp. They don't got a coach, Shane. So what they tried to do, they tried to get South Carolina's outstanding receivers coach, Justin Stepp, arguably the best receivers coach in the SEC, to come down to Gainesville. And I know South Carolina fans pumping out their chests that they were able to keep their coach, but it's just wild, Shane. And I'm not, this isn't not a total indictment on Billy Napier or anything like that, but it's pretty wild that, I have no idea if they were, how much money is involved here or anything like that, but it's wild that South Carolina can keep an assistant coach from Florida. Maybe not wild now, given the momentum of Shane Beamer's program, but 2, 3, 4 years ago, that would have never happened.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. South Carolina there for a minute was more of a stepping stone, and you're looking for your next opportunity, your big shot. Florida Gators was that big shot, and it's kind of changing. And I think as a South Carolina fan, you always hate when your coaches are potentially getting poached. It is a free agency. These guys can come and go as they please, but it's also a good thing, Mike. You want your coaches looked after. You want them, recruited to other universities, and because that means you're doing something right. And so I think Beamer and staff's definitely on track. Now, he goes on to talk about all of his staff getting poached. I don't know how much of South Carolina's, coaching staff has had a chance to go to the NFL or another SEC program. But the fact that we did have a few and the fact they were able to maintain them and keep them on campus, I think that says more about what they're building, the culture there in South Carolina. So I think if I'm a fan, I'm on cloud nine, and you got the right, man. Keep that chest pumped out because, people are looking at what you're doing and they want a piece of it.
Yeah, not only that, Shane, but I also think maybe those coaches know that they're building towards something special. And they're not, maybe they're not going to be there 4 or 5 years because you want your assistants to move on. You got a great receivers coach. You want them to be an offensive coordinator somewhere eventually, because all these guys want to move up the ladder, get more money and all that. So I'm not saying you want to keep these guys forever, but maybe this upcoming season is going to be such a great one that, that maybe that's why some of these assistants also staying on board. They believe in Shane Beamer. They believe in this roster. So, again, just yet another reason for South Carolina to be fired up for the upcoming season.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you who's not fired up, Shane, and that's old Dennis Dodd of old CBS Sports. I don't like to call people out, on this podcast if I don't have
Bruno, he's not here. Hey, chill, buddy.
He's right. Hey, your dog's right there with me, Shane, because again, we don't single people out that often on this show. And, but I just thought this was kind of a ridiculous thing to put out there. If you go over to, we'll put a link down there, CBS Sports, they did an article, things to look forward to all across the country with spring practice coming up. And basically the only one that was critical was on Tennessee, Shane. And here's a little snippet of what they had to say, which I thought was pretty interesting. He's calling out Nico and the $8 million NIL deal that Tennessee gave him. He mentions there's a quarterback competition, which that's not even true. I mean, it's Joe Milton's job. Nico is not going to unseat Joe Milton, not right out the gate. But here's the interesting part here, Shane. How Nico lives up to the contract mixed with a new offensive coordinator. You won't believe this. Actually, you will. There are already whispers that Nico is not worth the $8 million. Tennessee is covered as closely as the White House. And that's how he ends it. So, again, he's suggesting that the elite 5-star quarterback that everybody's fired up about is not worth the money. And, he may be right at the end of the day, Shane. I mean, that's a ton of money to give somebody. And it's very hard to live up to all the hype for not just for him, but any quarterback. I mean, how many 5-star quarterbacks have come into the SEC, Shane, and not lived up to the billing? It's about 50% of them. So, it's almost like throwing a dart and hoping you're right. But the only reason I'm calling attention to this is because, Shane, spring practice is about a week and a half away there on Rocky Top. You can't be judging a guy before he's already had his first spring practice. And from what I understand, he's been solid down there for the Orange Bowl. He was running the scout team. It's, I don't know. I just think this is a wild statement to be thrown out there for a true freshman. And I think what this really says to me, Shane, I don't know. I'm curious to get your thoughts, but I think this is Dennis Dodd saying, I don't like NIL. I hate that this kid's getting paid. This is bullshit. He's not going to live up to it. It seems like he's angry more about the deal than it is the player. What's your thoughts?
Well, Mike, I think it's the worst article ever written in college football history. Now, I've not read the article. I'm going to do that 2 weeks from now. But I'm going to take a stab at this and say that this opinion is the worst one that you'll ever get, Mike. I think this is a hit piece, Mike. Tennessee is an easy target. We love online. It's clickbait is what it is. And you throw out words like this, it's going to generate some interaction online, which is ultimately what you're going after here. Because there's no way in your right mind that you're hearing whispers. Legit, let's hear the sources, as Lane Kiffin likes to say. Who are you talking to that is saying that this is a bad bet? You know what I'm saying? Right. I think this is, like I don't want to. I've never met the man, and he may have meant well, and this may have been more of a general statement about the NIL, like you said, but to come out and say a kid's not going to be living up to the hype or living up to this money that he's earned, through his time in high school, I think that's just a bold statement, and I don't want to give it more attention than it deserves. Now, we go 2 years into this program, 3 years, and we're still in a quarterback controversy in Knoxville. Then maybe we can revisit this and say that it was that he was on to something. But again, you're just throwing a dart in the dark, or you're throwing. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Did I just make up a new saying? You're throwing a dart in the dark here. So you don't know if you're going to hit, but I'm not willing to give him I'm always optimistic, even if it's not my Tennessee Volunteers. It's another kid that's coming in. We're all different when we're 18. We're all different 19. 2021, this kid's going to get molded. He's going to be an athlete, and I guarantee he'll be a Division I player. Now, he may not be a Heisman winner, but I'm not willing to say that in 2023.
Right. And the only thing I'll add, and this is not even fair to even suggest, Shane, because, again, they've not even hit the field for spring practice, but I think A&M did teach a lot of people last season that you're walking a fine line here, because clearly there was issues there in College Station, and it led to a very, very disappointing season. Again, I'm not suggesting that is happening at Tennessee or it will happen, but it is something to monitor. And again, we can't really judge this till 2 or 3 years down the road, like you said. You know what?
Yeah. And the NIL, we knew this. This is going to be a growing experience. There's going to be growing pains that come along with it. And, there's not a simple recipe for how this should run. And I think they're all trying to figure it out. Money will figure its way out. These kids that are getting these large contracts, you're not going to see that if you're not getting the production on the back end. It's going to go away. So it will adjust accordingly, but it may be ready. It may go the opposite way. There may be kids landing $20, $30 million contracts. And don't be surprised if that happens, because look at Georgia, look at LSU. When these teams are producing, the revenue comes in. They make their money back. So, it's I don't know. It's uncharted territory, and it is ugly, but it is a part of college football, and it will be for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Shane, we had a little bit of a bomb dropped here on Friday, and I was so excited. I told you about it, and you were making fun of me. My God, you said Mike wants to do a podcast now. I really did want to. And so let's get to that. That's what we're going to talk about, the SEC schedule. Everybody's been talking about this thing, going to a 9-game model, 3 permanents, 6 rotating. And we're getting closer and closer and closer, Shane, to this being finalized. And none other than the man himself, Nick Saban, who always seems to have an opinion or he's got to get a message out because he realizes he's arguably the most powerful man in the sport.
Right.
So he tries to jump out ahead of these things. But according to some really good reporting here, Ross Dellinger, Sports Illustrated, one of the best out there, went down to Tuscaloosa, met with Nick Saban. And my goodness, Shane, is old Pap all mad. What's he mad about? And this was interesting. He leaked it himself. He says they are giving us Tennessee, no surprise, as an annual opponent. Auburn, you had to have known they were going to give them Auburn.
Right.
And LSU. So why is Nick Saban mad? Well, according to what Ross Dellinger says, Nick Saban says, the SEC is currently in the process of figuring out these schedules. They're looking at all the SEC teams, including Texas and Oklahoma, looking at them the last 10 seasons, and they're kind of putting them top half, bottom half, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
obviously Alabama, you're at the very top. Vanderbilt, you're at the very bottom. And they're trying to pair this up not only for rivalries, they're obviously going to keep the rivalries intact. They're trying their best to keep proximity in the discussion so that we don't have Texas A&M playing South Carolina every year. That makes no sense.
Right.
And what they're trying to do is balance. If you're one of those top half teams, you're probably going to get another 2 top half teams. If you're in the bottom, you're going to get 2 bottom teams to kind of just make it more competitive. And that's where Nick Saban is getting mad. Here's his quote exactly. And I can't believe it, Shane, that Tennessee, their graphics team and all this, they haven't plastered this all over the internet. Here's what Nick Saban had to say about Tennessee. They did a 10-year whatever. That sounds like a papaw, doesn't it? 10-year whatever. Well, some of those years, Tennessee wasn't as good as they've been in previous 10 years. But now that they're good, they use that to be before those 10 years. We got 3 teams, and 2 of them in the top 10, and the other is in the top 10 a lot. Historically, over a 25-year history, and the 3 best in the East are Georgia, Tennessee, and Florida. You look at historically in 25 years, Alabama, LSU, and Auburn, 3 best in the West. So we're playing all of them. And oh my God, Nick Saban complaining. He's got more money, more resources, better roster, better coaching staff than anybody in the country. He's dominated the sport for 2 decades, and he's sitting here complaining about having to play Tennessee, Auburn, and LSU. What's your thoughts on that, Shane?
Holy shit, man! If he would have saw me valet parking, we would have had an argument there. I don't know, man. I mean, I get his point. Now, the first reaction, obviously, is I was trying to think. My kids use this. They say, "Don't be a Karen." What's the male version? Don't be a Steve, is it? Is it Steve? A Kevin. Don't be a Kevin, And sorry if Kevin's listening here. You've probably heard that joke before. But I think about when he was complaining about the college football playoffs, and then you followed it up with this one, and I'm not getting my damn way, Mike. That's what you think. But when you do pull back the layers, okay, and you forget the coaches, forget all the noise for a second, he's got a point, man. You got Auburn, that's won national championships. Mm-hmm. You got Tennessee, which is up and coming, which is, I'm not saying they're going to compete for national champions anytime soon, but, it's a team that beat you last year. And then you got LSU, which is historically going to find its way on a national stage at some point. So I think he's got a point there. But then part of me is like, Nick Saban, you're not going to coach forever. You created a legacy down there in Tuscaloosa. Don't you want your predecessor to have a little tougher when you leave? So maybe this is all just noise, Mike. He's got to say what he's got to say for the Alabama fans. But deep down inside, he wishes they could throw Georgia in the mix.
Well, and then adding some extra validity, Shane, to what Saban is saying. Scott Rabelais of The Advocate, he's been covering LSU for years and years and years. He says LSU is going to play Alabama in this new format. So
yeah,
that's pretty interesting. LSU is also going to play Texas A&M. We kind of already knew that one. And then here's another revealing one. LSU facing Ole Miss, and that matches what Ross Dellinger, who did the story with Nick Saban, has put out a list of. It's not he's not saying this is the list. He's saying reporting, talking to people. We've got the 3 permanents kind of settled for every single team. Before we get into every single one here, Shane, what's your thoughts on LSU? Again, playing A&M. You feel like that was a natural.
Mm-hmm.
Alabama, great game nearly every year. It's one of the best in the SEC. And Ole Miss, which means we're not going to get LSU Arkansas every year. We're not going to play that Golden Boot, unfortunately. But the Ole Miss, that is a rivalry. They, what do they call it? The Magnolia Bowl or something like that.
All right, back to kind of leading into this. Alabama. Before we get to LSU here, you got Auburn, you got Tennessee, and you got LSU. These are 3 teams you were playing every year anyway. Right. It's not like they introduced a new rivalry and said, hey, this is something that the fans want to see. This is something that you've been doing, and it makes sense. Auburn is kind of down right now, so maybe that was their argument. Is the same Saban argument he made with Tennessee? You could flip flop it with Auburn. They've had some rough years here the last few seasons. So going into LSU's schedule, I'm not totally surprised. I mean, obviously, I was wanting the Arkansas game. I thought that would be really good. It's just a fun matchup. They always play each other tough. But Texas A&M, you got to keep that one, and the Ole Miss, that's one that I think will grow on us, especially if Lane Kiffin stays up there. I think that could be a hell of a matchup and a fun game to watch. So I can buy into this, brother. I can. And proximity is important. They're not too far away. I mean, they're just one state, it's on the opposite end of the state, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. So let's go over, Shane, the reported 9-game SEC annual opponents list that has been put out there. And, this is Nick Saban saying it. This is LSU reporters saying it. So this is not the official finalized list, Shane, but I think it's going to be very, very close if it's not the exact list. And I think they're going to, the SEC presidents, Shane, they met over the weekend. This is the topic they wanted to discuss. So I don't think they're going to turn around and confirm anything this upcoming week because we got the SEC basketball tournament.
Yeah.
They're not going to want to take attention away from that. But I would anticipate, Shane, here very soon, maybe 2-3 weeks, they are going to release this, given the fact that so many people already got their, 3 finalized and everything. So they are getting closer and closer. So I'm just going to go down the list. And then
before you do that, Mike, I think this is a good thing. You and I think we're in favor of this format.
Yeah.
So they're listening. They're listening. And it doesn't mean that's going to stay this way forever. But for the time being, I think it's great, especially for the fans. Obviously, there's going to be some that we're going to talk about here in a little bit that broke my heart that we're not an annual rivalry. And I think you already know who that's going to be. But I will say this, Mike. We're going to get to see, like even Nick Saban complaining about LSU and Tennessee. And you know what? They're still going to play Georgia every other year. They're still going to play Florida every other year. So the beautiful thing about this schedule for a fan is we're going to see some freaking awesome games, and we're going to get another SEC one. So that's one less cupcake that you gotta get through. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, let's get to this. You could pretty much lock it in that this is what we're going to have. Now, there may be some fine-tuning on these games, which we'll discuss, but I think it's a great concept.
And one other thing I'll add to that, Shane, where, there's been many years where, let's just use the example we keep talking about, Alabama and LSU, clearly the 2 best teams in the SEC.
Yeah.
Yet, it's basically the winner of that, and then they got some cupcake out of the East that they beat the hell out of, and they go on to the playoff. In this format, we're doing away with that. In the 90s, it was Florida and Tennessee, and it was basically whoever won that game, you're probably going to win the SEC. We're doing away with that. And not that I'm sitting here wanting LSU and Alabama to meet 2-3 times, but if they are the 2 best teams in the SEC, they deserve the right to play it out in the SEC championship game. So it may have some more rematches, but I think we'll get more competitive SEC championship games, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, who would have been your SEC championship this year, Mike? Two games that we wanted to see was Tennessee or Georgia and sorry, I keep wanting to crown them, but they should have been there, but stupid Columbia. But Georgia and Alabama, I think you could have made an argument, even though LSU won the West. I still think after, I don't know. They would have took Alabama. I mean, if you're choosing like in this bracket
I would have rather seen Tennessee and Georgia. But again, I don't know how they would have looked at Hendon Hooker getting hurt.
Right.
We don't live in a fantasy land where if he was healthy, I mean, hell, on a neutral field, who knows? But I think it would have been a hell of a lot better game than LSU, who Tennessee smoked in Baton Rouge.
But clearly, the people probably making the decisions were part of the ones making the decisions on the college football playoffs, and they had Alabama ahead of Tennessee. So even the Alabama-Georgia game, a game that we didn't get to see last year, we would have. And it could have impacted the college football playoffs. It was just been fun. But now it's just going to be, well, what ifs, and Saban lost a couple of games by one possession. And is that a season that got squandered? So I think you're going to wash some of that away with the extension of the college football playoffs. And you got to get out of your mind, there's the undefeated seasons are going to be even harder to see and duplicate. We watched Georgia run the table. That's not something you're going to keep being able to do in this conference. And so yes, you're going to have some tough losses, but unlike the 90s, that one loss that keeps you out of everything, you're still going to have an opportunity to get back into it. You look at teams like LSU that really struggled out of the gate. They would have had an opportunity for the college football playoffs, even though they had those losses. So I think that's the key for me. Yes, it takes the passion or the pressure of that every game matters. But I still think it does, man, because when you get to the end of this thing, it's going to be a proven track record, and they're going to look, okay, you lost this one, but how much did you lose? There's going to be some factors, so I still think every game's going to matter. It's just I think teams change throughout the season, and we're going to see better football at the end of it.
Yep. All right, so here's what's being reported as the three for each team, Shane. We already did Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee, LSU. Sorry, Papaw. Arkansas, how about this one, Shane? Missouri, just turning into a nice little series, even though the Razorbacks hate them and hate calling that a rivalry. You get Texas. That's what you're dying to get. I mean, that's a hell of a game, Texas, Arkansas. And then Ole Miss, so which, hell, annually, that's one of the more exciting, fun games. They hate Lane Kiffin. It's perfect.
Yeah. No, I think this one's going to grow on you. Clearly, you can't say you want Texas and then be afraid of Texas. So having them in the three, I think, is very important. Yep. Mizzou, that one kind of got force-fed to us a little bit. But like you said, it has turned into a hell of a matchup and a lot of shit-talking. And that's what these games are about for me, man, is the build-up and then the talk that you can do after the game. So I hope that continues to go. And Ole Miss is always fun. So I think they did okay with the Arkansas. It's probably not the three I would have chose, but this is three I can definitely get behind. And I think a lot of Razorback fans will too.
Yep. All right, how about Auburn, Shane, again? Man, good luck. You got Alabama, of course. You got Georgia, maybe the two, without a doubt, the two best programs in recent history. So they give you a break. They're giving you Vanderbilt. That's the one we kind of suggested they should do for balance sake. And man, I'd be shaking my head if I was a Vanderbilt fan because I'm like, they gave us Auburn because they got the damn juggernaut. So you know what I mean?
This is what Saban's talking about. Why don't we get Vandy, That's what he's doing. He's looking next door. But yes, you're right. If you poll the top 25, last 25 seasons, the two best teams, Bama and Georgia, are going to be the top of those, and you're going to face them. And you're going to face them every single year. So I think that's great because they're some of our favorite rivalries, of course. And I'm okay with Vanderbilt. I think this was just like a sympathy game added here at the end. Yeah. They could have squeezed in a Division II, and I would have been okay. I'm like, okay, I get it. Put Tulane back in the SEC and let Auburn play. That's their third game. So
All right, how about Florida, Shane? Got to give them Georgia. We knew that was going to be the case. South Carolina, I kind of assumed that would be a natural.
Before we go, I know Tulane's not Division II, so I just wanted to pause the angry typing. I probably should have went with Sewanee or something, But
Georgia, South Carolina, and then here's the wild card. This is the one we threw out there. Kind of heard rumblings this was going to be the case. Pretty weird, but Florida versus Oklahoma, which major gap in proximity, of course, but we're talking two of the proud programs in college football history. This is, the Florida LSU game was one where that was kind of a forced rivalry, but it became a great one. I think this Florida-Oklahoma, even though there is some history. They played, I believe, in a BCS national championship game. Mm-hmm. They played in a recent bowl game. I could see that growing into a nice little rivalry.
Yeah, this one is tough. Kind of has the makings of that A&M South Carolina you were talking about earlier. Proximity is definitely not the thing they were looking at here, but it does tie in some of that recruiting to the state of Florida. I think if you're looking at the SEC as a whole, you want to bring some of that West out east, and I think that you can make an argument this is good for them and good for that brand. I think this is as powerful as Oklahoma is. I think this strengthens their viewership online. So I can get behind it. Obviously, the first few years it's going to be weird, but if you think both these teams running, if they're at the top of their game, man, we could have some epic showdowns between those two guys, and so I'm all for it.
Yeah. So Georgia, of course, they get
I'm sorry, and the rest of it, I think that was a no-brainer for me. Yeah. Sorry.
Georgia gets Florida, of course. They get Auburn. We already said that. Now here's the wild card. This one makes no sense to me at all.
No.
Kentucky. I mean, those have been some pretty. I don't know if competitive is the right word because Georgia wins every damn one of them. But Kentucky has, they're physical. They match a lot of them physical wise, and they've been giving them Georgia some fits. But I mean, they could never play that game ever, and I wouldn't miss it. You know what I mean? So playing that one annually just doesn't make a ton of sense to me.
No, and I think they really shit the bed here with Kentucky's too, which is going to be your next one that you talk about. I don't quite understand. Clearly, there are some Kentucky rivalries. We talked about the South Carolina one. That one has become fun and entertaining. Those guys hate each other. But Tennessee, man, the Tennessee Vols should be there. But I'm sorry, I don't want to take away from Georgia. It seems like why is Kentucky and South Carolina not flipped here? It makes sense. They're right next to each other. There's been some good games between them. I don't think either program would be mad if they had to do it. It's just, it kind of surprises me they went that route when they could have easily have chosen South Carolina. So I don't know. I don't, like you said, these things aren't completely solid and etched in stone. If they could tweak anything, I think it's Kentucky's 3. I would definitely look a little harder at. Yeah. But like you said, Kentucky and Georgia, they've had some really good games here the last few seasons. It's just not, it's one-sided.
Right. So let's get to Kentucky since that's all you want to talk about here. Kentucky gets Mississippi State, which you've been playing annually, so that makes some sense. And that's a competitive series, so I think Kentucky will be okay with it. But South Carolina, I mean, that game's fun because Stoops made fun of the damn glasses, and that was a fun game last year. I'll give you that. But again, Georgia makes no sense. And you said it perfectly. I'm just going to repeat what you said. Just flip-flop that. I mean, give Kentucky, Tennessee. That's a game, I believe they played 114 times, played every year for 100-something years. And why Georgia is not playing South Carolina instead of Kentucky. I mean, we're basically talking about two programs that are, when they talked about those upper tier and those bottom tier, South Carolina and Kentucky, while they're very close to the top tier, I think they're bottom tier, at least based on the last 10 years. So it would make complete sense just to switch those out, and you're not messing with the proximity, or you're not messing with parity of the league and everything. That one makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I don't like South Carolina as a Tennessee fan. I don't. But I don't hate them, you know? I hate Kentucky. I hate Kentucky. I hate Florida. That's just rivalries I grew up to. It just means a little bit more for me, and to it's a simple switch, and I think all parties are in better mood. So I don't know the angle there. I want to give a shout out. Buddy of mine, we do the bourbon bet every single year, and that's going to go away if this is true. We'll have to do it every other year. So maybe they had something. Maybe Ollie sent in a letter, saying I can't afford this bourbon every year. So maybe we could do it every other year. I don't know if that was the case, but I didn't give Todd the respect. He sent me down some wonderful Maker's Mark here, and Kentucky straight bourbon, and he even wrote on there, like had it printed on there, Cousin Shane, go Cats. This is a bet that we have every year. If Tennessee wins, I'll get a bottle of that Kentucky bourbon, and if Kentucky wins, which is rare, I'll send them some of that fine Tennessee whiskey. So it's just a wonderful bet, but that's it, man. When I think of Kentucky, when I think of rivalry, somebody asks me what's Kentucky's rivalry, I always think Tennessee. It's not just it's basketball, it's baseball, it's any type of sport. We're going to compete with each other. So I think they really missed the boat here with that one, and it kind of hurts my feelings because it's one of my favorite games, man. The build up to it and everything. But again, Todd, Ollie, those boys, I got one more sitting out there. So Roush, I'll see you at media days. You better have mine. But I just want to give those boys a shout out, and I'll get a picture of these bottles if you're watching online on our YouTube channel. I'll show you. These boys they put a little extra zing on their bottle. So at least while I'm drinking it, I got to think of Kentucky.
So we already hit on LSU, Shane, A&M, Ole Miss, Alabama. A lot of that makes sense. No complaints there from me. So for Ole Miss, of course, we had to keep Mississippi State. Got to keep the Egg Bowl intact. Yeah. LSU, we've already talked about, and Arkansas, we've already talked about. So if I'm an Ole Miss fan, Shane, I think I'm pretty fired up with this trio that we got.
Yeah, I think Ole Miss made out like a bandit, to be honest with you. If I'm just looking at scheduling alone, I think that the proximity is important. This is a couple rivalries you got to have, obviously, with Mississippi State. But that Arkansas one, I could be fed that, and they hate LSU, and that game's turned out to be pretty damn good. So, yeah, I think they hit a home run here.
So for Mississippi State, of course, flipping the Egg Bowl, they get Ole Miss, of course. You couldn't take that one away. Kentucky, we talked about. They've been playing them for years, so it makes some sense. And then Texas A&M, which they actually have a winning record over A&M since they joined the SEC. So if I'm a Mississippi State fan, I think I'm pretty fired up about it. And the number one thing we heard, Shane, when we put out our list, don't give us Alabama. What the hell? Who cares about proximity? They've beaten us 20 years in a row, whatever it is. Yeah. We do not want Alabama. So if I'm a Mississippi State fan, I'm fired up with this one.
Absolutely. And we will still be reminded every other year how close Mississippi State and Alabama are. But yeah, I think if I'm State fan, I'm looking at this. Ole Miss, clearly. UK, I like it. Texas A&M, we've had your number here for the next few years. So I think we're in good shape here, and Mississippi State fans, I think they'll be happy.
Another one I think's got to be happy here, Shane, Missouri. You get Arkansas, who you've owned, and they won't call it a rivalry because you're beating them every year. Vanderbilt, that's another. I mean, everybody that gets Vanderbilt, they feel like they hit the lotto in this thing. And poor Oklahoma, Vandy. They played over 90 times, I believe, given their history in the Big 12 and all that. So I think if you're a Missouri fan, you're pretty fired up about your trio you got.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Oklahoma with the Texas, I think this is a good fit. We've said that word too many damn times, proximity. I feel like it's 007 with the proximity mines. You remember that game back in the day, throwing around everywhere? I don't think I've used the word since then, but this is a good fit. Mizzou, I think Eli's happy, tickled pink. You got Vandy. You've got an Oklahoma that's down. I think more like up front too. Arkansas still trying to work some kinks out. They're not humming like they want to be. Oklahoma's coming in off a bad season. You got Vanderbilt. So here we talked about on a earlier show that Mizzou's got to crank up real quick because the schedule gets tougher. Yes, they're going to have more SEC games, but they got 3 teams right now that aren't playing their best football. Now they could be. And I'd hate to see Oklahoma and Arkansas, if they're on the top, then Mizzou fans may look at this a little bit different. But time being, I think you got a good schedule coming up.
So for Oklahoma, then Shane, of course, you got to keep that Texas game. We already said we're getting Missouri, and then you're getting that. This is the weirdest one on the map, Florida. But again, there's reasons to like that. If I'm an OU fan, I think I'm okay with this 3.
Yeah, I think you are too, and you didn't game Texas A&M. A lot of people were wondering if that was going to be one that you had. They didn't force feed you some old rivalries, so right. I like this Texas keeping that one. Mizzou, we've talked about, and the Florida, that one again, it's going to take some growing, getting used to, but I think that's one that will grow on us. The more they play.
The only critique I would potentially have, Shane, maybe you drop Florida and you switch in like Arkansas, which I believe is fairly close to Oklahoma. I think it's could be the closest campus to Oklahoma, but I think that would make Oklahoma fans happy. But there's just so many pieces to this puzzle. I think that's why we get this oddity,
Yeah, and it kind of surprised me that neither one of the Mississippi schools pulled them either. If you're thinking close to home, that would have made sense to me. But it's like you said, you're playing a game and you're trying to fit all these pieces. There's not a perfect schedule, and but they're pretty damn close in my opinion.
Yeah, for South Carolina, Shane, Kentucky again. That's kind of weird, but they've been playing annually for a while.
Yeah,
Florida makes all the sense in the world. But you already hit on it, Tennessee. I mean, I'll tell you what, Tennessee, South Carolina fans, that's the number one battle in the offseason in my mention. So maybe this is a much more heated rivalry than we're making it out to be. But again, I think you drop Tennessee, you switch it out for Georgia. Of course, I don't know if South Carolina fans want. I don't know if anybody wants Georgia right now. So maybe you're happy with this, but I think Georgia makes a hell of a lot more sense. That's I feel like. Obviously Clemson's their biggest rival, but I thought Georgia was their number 2 rival in the SEC. I would switch Tennessee for Georgia. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Frank Beamer may have something to do with this one, just pulling some of them old skeletons out of the closet. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think if you're a Gamecock fan, you love this. You absolutely love it. You're not scared of any team on that. So you're not getting a Georgia. That's the bad thing, because sometimes, how many times have we been doing the best case scenario and then we run up to a Georgia team or an Alabama team? We're like, well, that's a loss. I don't think you can just pencil that in. Now, obviously, Tennessee fans, they can't stand South Carolina, so that's a rivalry that will be picking up steam, especially the last 2 years, the way we've been playing and recruiting and talking, just shit talking all the time. So that makes for good football. So it will. This is one of those that maybe 5 years from now, we're not even looking back. We're like, oh yeah, it's Tennessee, South Carolina. So, but for the time being, I think South Carolina made out like a bandit here.
Right, and I would say this too, Shane, if I'm a South Carolina fan, obviously Shane Beamer's only been down there 2 years. He's beaten every team in that list, so maybe I do look at it and say, sign me up, man, because we're only getting better. You know what?
Yeah, that's right.
So for Tennessee, obviously we already talked about it, Alabama, that makes all the sense in the world. Vanderbilt, in-state, you kind of had to keep that one going. But again, South Carolina, so I've seen the reaction here, Shane. Many Tennessee fans would rather play Kentucky over South Carolina, but also I've seen, I've not seen many Tennessee fans disappointed in this. They're ready to sign up for this 3. What's your thoughts?
Well, I'm good with it. I mean, we could take Alabama out if you wanted to. I'm not just kidding. Just kidding. I know we got to have that game, and it was fantastic. Because when you do win, Mike, it made it that much more. I mean, we had so much fun. Obviously the season didn't go like we wanted to as Tennessee fans, but damn, that night, irreplaceable. It was the feeling that we had. It was surreal. So Vandy, absolutely, we love that one. Alabama will take. South Carolina, we would love to switch with Kentucky, but I've also heard some that wish we had Florida because, growing up in the 90s, that's what it was Tennessee and Florida. But, again, these are teams that you're still going to play every other year. So there'll be a year you don't play Florida, but you pick them up the following season. So you're going to get a full dose of SEC scheduling.
So for Texas, Shane, Oklahoma, of course, Texas A&M, love to see that just printed anywhere that they're going to play each other. And then obviously Arkansas we hit on. So, hey, not an easy road by any means for Texas. They're loading up the Longhorns with the tough schedule here. But
that's right.
At the end of the day, I mean, if you want to talk great historic rivalries and games, you're getting it with this trio.
Yes, welcome to the SEC, Mike. It was almost like this was done for them. Like this is coming over. We know we got to keep the Oklahoma game. We want to see the Texas A&M game. And who else can we pick? Oh, yeah, the other team that's hated you forever, so Arkansas. So, this is old blood, but it will be bad blood, and I can't wait to see all three of these meet every year.
Yeah, so I think A&M really made out here too, Shane, because they're growing rivalry with LSU, obviously the Texas game, and Mississippi State, which is, again, you have a losing record against them, so I'm not chalking that up as an easy one by any means because it's proven otherwise, but I think I'm pretty fired up if I'm a A&M fan with this 3-0.
I think you are too, Mike. This one is a good setup for the Aggies and kind of what we were thinking. The Mississippi one, that one kind of threw us off a little, but I can be convinced that it could be a good rivalry. And like you said, it's not a team they've just beat. They've actually, like you said, lost more. So I think this one is going to be fantastic. And but man, I think they made out. The more I look at that, I think they did good. This is going to be so fun. I'm looking at these games, man. I'm like, Texas A&M and Texas, LSU. Get them back to back. It's going to be awesome, brother.
Well, talking about making out, Shane, final one here, Vanderbilt. I think, honestly, everybody wanting Vanderbilt. That's kind of the running joke. But they get Tennessee, Missouri, and Auburn. Yeah. And say what you want, Tennessee on the rise. We all know that program's always a scandal away from falling apart here. I mean, I think Vanderbilt, not that they're going to beat all these teams annually or anything, but you can make the case. I mean, Auburn, too, is always inconsistent, it seems like. Missouri is not world beaters. So if I'm a Vanderbilt fan, I'm pretty fired up about this one.
Well, even going like into last season, when we were looking at it, if these three would have been on your schedule, you could easily convince me that they'll win one of them, right. and sometimes that one is the one you least expect, and sometimes you're losing your job. That's the power of losing to Vanderbilt is like, shit, you can't beat these guys within, So, I mean, think about it. I still see videos of the Florida upset. They were single filing, walking down to the field with a $250,000 fine. It was the slowest crowd reaction ever, but it was still a monumental win for Vanderbilt, the Kentucky game. So I think these three teams, obviously if you're picking best case scenario, they're going to probably lose to all three of them. But you can't rule out the fact that these guys can step up any season and be closer to these three than other programs in the SEC.
Yeah, and we get to drop Georgia, which is what everybody in the East wants to do right now. You know what?
Absolutely. I'm glad I got rid of Georgia too.
Well, buddy, hey, that's all I got on this episode of the show. Hopefully, I can just imagine them changing this thing in a week, and then we got to talk about it all again. But this is the biggest topic in the SEC. It's going to be finalized very, very soon. I can't get enough of it, but you got anything before we hop off the line?
No. Sometimes I drift because I do think about the games we're going to get to see, and And you're talking 9 SEC opponents. It's fantastic, Mike. We're talking some great games, and they're still going to have some powerhouses that they're going against. We're going to have multi-loss teams, but it doesn't matter because every weekend we're going to see a hell of a show. So, yeah, I love it. I can't wait to talk more about it, Mike. And, yeah, like you said, the schedules may change tomorrow. At least put the Kentucky one back on, man. I'm still heartbroken on that one, but other than that, I'm pumped up, man.
And what's funny about it too, Shane, is just that, we're just talking 3 of 9. So you may be happy with your 3, you may be disappointed with your 3, but then you got to turn around and say, oh, you know who else is on the schedule? Oklahoma, Georgia, LSU, A&M, Tennessee. It's like, oh my God, this is a murderer's row coming up here.
That's going to be the next one that they're going to complain like, yeah, but we got to play Georgia and Bama away, every other year. Or every fourth year. That's bullshit. They should. I can't wait for them to start. Yeah, because there's going to be those guys. Just like, remember how they were talking about Auburn and Georgia? They were like, well, it's not fair that we play them at home and home. It's going to be the same deal. So that's going to be the next argument is how, who else do you play on your away game? So sorry, I'm rambling. It's getting late. Better jump into this bottle, Todd.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to end it, Shane. I appreciate you as always. I appreciate each and every one of you for hanging out. We'll catch you on the next one.
All right, see you guys. Go Vols. Go to hell, Columbia.